I want to give a class today on gun safety. And what made me think about it is I was listening to a podcast on gun violence on the way back from our border run. And, there's a lot of people who want to get into firearms, want to get into guns, but they're scared. They're intimidated. And I often neglect the fact that people are scared of firearms because they're uneducated on really how they work, how to be safe with them, and also the benefit of utilizing one. So what I want to do is talk today a little bit about firearms operations, how they operate. I'll be utilizing an AR15 and a Glock 17 today. Talk about some gun statistics that you might not even know about to advocate from my position, which is that everybody should be firearm owners, but should be responsible as well. Because there are irresponsible people in our society who just don't know what the hell they're doing. And that's a problem. I think everybody should obviously be able to exercise their right and utilize a firearm in sport shooting and hunting and self-defense, but I also think it should be done the right way. An interesting statistic that a portion of our society likes to put out there to kind of discriminate and create the perception that firearms are bad is the fact that they say that around 30,000 people per year die in gun violence, which is true. It's a fact. If you look at heart disease statistics and cancer statistics and accident statistics, it would trump 100-fold the firearm statistic. But it's an interesting point. The point is that, yes, people do die from firearms. What they fail to point out is the fact that 65% of those 30,000 people who die every year from firearms die from suicide, self-inflicted gunshot wounds. I mean, let that sink in. You say, 30,000 people a year die from gun violence, but you don't say 65% of those people die from self-inflicted gunshot wounds because of mental health issues. Then you're identifying what you think is one problem without identifying the majority and more significant problem, which is mental health. Every single mass shooter, which is I believe, and I'm sorry if this isn't right, every single mass shooter, which means a shooting involving more than 3 casualties, has been diagnosed. And I don't see every single, because I think there's a couple that haven't, because there's crimes of passion, right? Has been diagnosed with a mental health disorder in conjunction with a psychological or a psychological prescription of a drug. That is an issue. Why aren't we looking at the mental health crisis and then we look at specifically the tangible object? So if it was a vehicle that was being used for to inflict mass casualties or damage, then you would look at the vehicle and say, yeah, this is a vehicle problem. When vehicles are utilized every single day to transport people to work, to transport people for traveling, to commute back and forth, the list goes on. So why would you not associate the fact that they're used for catastrophic events? Because it doesn't make sense, that's why. And so when you look at a firearm, it's very easy for somebody who's not educated for why you would utilize a firearm in sport shooting, in competitive shooting and hunting, and then blacklist all the firearms that are out there and say, hey, it shouldn't be utilized because it's being used to commit crimes. It's being used to commit mass casualties. Something else to think about is the fact that firearms are being utilized to kill people, but in that 30,000 statistic, 65% of them are self-inflicted gunshot wounds, but 80% of those leftover are gang violence and criminals. And even in that statistic is justified homicide or justified self-defense by law enforcement, which tallies in the hundreds. So why aren't we pointing out the whole truth, which is nothing but the truth, right? So my whole thinking and doing all this stuff is you can't just tell half truths to manipulate your situation. You got to tell whole truths. Like on this border run and this immigration issue, yes, Fieldcraft, myself, I think, the majority of law-abiding, common sense citizens understand that women and children do come across the border. Middle-aged males do come across the border to get a better life. There's no doubt. I would do that. If I was a Mexican growing up in Mexico or Juarez, the number one crime-ridden city in the universe, that has more murders in 1 year than combat casualties across the whole entire GWAT, I would want to get out of there. So that's nobody's saying that that's not a fact and that's not truth. But the whole truth is that there are people smuggling drugs, and it's been going on for 30 plus years. And it's narcs, it's opiates, it's cocaine, and these are hard drugs that are killing our country. And I think they're responsible for a lot of the deaths that take place in the United States. And it could be a second and third order effect of that happening. You want to look at people and go, oh, people are the problem. They shoot up the drugs and they kill themselves. Well, no. Yeah, that's part of the truth. But the entire truth is that there are intelligent organizations that are smuggling drugs across our border because they know that the rate of frequency of addiction in these drugs is going to kill people and make them more addicted to make them more money. It's a business. So yeah, that's the partial truth. So my whole deal is when we educate ourselves, we got to get the whole grasp of the entire picture. We can make good decisions for ourselves, our families, our community, our family and friends. And then maybe when we go to the table and come up with a kind of another thought process, it might be more intelligent. It might be from a different perspective. I don't think, personally speaking, and maybe I'll convince you of that argument at the end of this, I don't think guns are the problem. I think people are the problems. I think our mental health system is part of the problem. I think pharmaceuticals and the medical system are part of the problem. But I'm, at this moment, focusing on, at the tactical level, what we can do together in order to, defend ourselves. A lot of people think that the Second Amendment is a privilege. They think it's a privilege. They think it's a want. And so the way they communicate guns in the political system, at the community level, or even in their own circles, is they think it's a privilege. It's not a privilege. Owning a firearm is a right. It's a right of an American to do so. And the Second Amendment, there's a lot of controversy with the two sentences in the Second Amendment that have created this kind of toxic take at the political level, and even at the tactical level, the level that we live at. One of them is the misrepresentation of the Second Amendment, stating that we think it's a privilege. It's not a privilege. It's a right. It's a right of every American. And so if you understand that it's a right of every American, then you would understand, and you do some historical research on the way that guns have been managed in our political system, in our government system. There's a whole bunch of highlights that I'll talk about that will blow your mind. One of the reasons that they were arming militias and the people, which were militias and the people at the time, was because they were afraid of tyrannical governments. That's literally in our history. So you have a tyrannical government, which at that time was the British. We're afraid that they're going to be tyrannical in the instatement of a new government, in the formulation of a new government. So we create this Constitution that has this Bill of Rights, has all these constitutional amendments and rights that are part of our core. The Second Amendment, defending ourselves against tyrannical governments from oppressing its people. That's important to acknowledge. So think about that for a second. So if you're the right, you go, I want a gun because it's my right. If you're on the left, you go, you know what? Nobody should own firearms. Not anybody should be allowed to own firearms. And so we should take those firearms away, or we should be able to restrict the use of those firearms. But when you think about that, it's like, why would you not, from the left, from the right, in between, why would you not want to arm yourself as a community, as a family, from crazy ass government entities? I mean, look at the government right now. Look at the toxic entities from the left. Look at what we think is all the extreme rigidity from the right. I mean, government systems by default typically spin themselves into these redundant boxes of just talking points, but not a lot gets done. That's why it's called a bureaucracy. And so why would you not want to arm yourself to protect your communities and the people from a tyrannical government? That's number one. I just think about that. I'm like, dude, if I'm a liberal and I'm in the middle of San Francisco and I'm hardcore liberal, why would you not want to protect yourself from a crazy ass government from taking over your rights? That's number one. But instead, you oppose firearms, and at the highest levels, right? And we talk political statements. Let's take Hillary Clinton. I mean, you could use the same analogy, but I use Hillary Clinton because she's anti firearm, anti-gun. Her husband enacted a whole bunch of laws banning assault weapons. Why is it okay for you to be a politician or an actor or an actress or a professional athlete and be surrounded with men that are carrying firearms, but me as a civilian, a law-abiding citizen, can't carry a pistol in my waistband to protect myself? Why is that? Well, I can't afford a security detail to protect myself. And then what is the justification? Well, if you're a political official, you're a high value target. Well, if you look at statistics, how many politicians have been gunned down in the streets of the inner cities? Think about that. Well, I could tell you in the last 7 days in Chicago, specifically the inner city of Chicago, 14 people were murdered. Just let that sink in. So you have to justify the means. Well, what's the means? How many politicians are being gunned down in the streets of inner cities? Well, maybe you could say, oh, the argument is it's because they have details. I doubt that. Most politicians don't do that. So now look at the inner city, Chicago, which has had, I think on the scale of the strictest gun laws, I think they're number 4 or 6. And I might be misquoting that, and I apologize if I am, but 4 or 6 in the strictest gun laws in America. So you ask yourself, if you're in the inner city of Chicago, is your life less important to protect yourself? I would say no. Logically speaking, common sense speaking, the answer would be no. But if you're a politician, you could have a detail of men carrying semi-automatic pistols, sometimes semi-automatic and automatic rifles to protect them from danger. So number one, what is the justification for carrying a firearm? It's self-defense, right? It's self-defense outside of the foundation of that, which is tyrannical governments, which is a correlation to our right to own a firearm. So why should a politician be able to dictate that? The second thing is, so if you're an actor or an actress in the state of California, you could pay a lot of money and go through the loopholes to get a security detail to protect yourself. So a right for the privileged. I'm not a privileged dude. I run a small business. I make $45,000 a year. I'm not rich, but I will carry a pistol to protect myself in the great state of Arizona because it's my right. And thank God Arizona understands that right. And by law, it's now a privilege. But these states in like for example, California will say, no. The common people of that state can't do it. And then what's the justification or the means for the justification? They can't answer that. They say, what's gun violence? Well, how are you painting that picture? Most are painting the picture that 30,000 people a year die from firearms, which is true. Now, if we're just looking at numbers, then why aren't you looking at heart disease? And why aren't you shutting down McDonald's? Why? Because of profit margins. and a whole bunch of other variables that will blow and boggle your mind. But we can't concentrate our efforts on that. Let's focus on stuff that we can affect. What we can affect is legislation at the local level. Let me give you a fun fact. California has the strictest gun laws in the United States, almost on board with New York and Washington, D.C. You know a fun fact? A fun fact is the reason they have the strictest gun laws is because of the Black Panthers. Yep, the Black Panthers. In the 70s and 80s, when the Black Panthers were making a movement against racism, and they were, there's no doubt. There's no doubt that African American men, women, and children were oppressed and were victims of racism in the 70s and 80s. And so how did they fix that? Well, they did one thing that all Americans could do. They stood up and they got a firearm, a rifle. And they said, we're going to protect ourselves from police officers. Because there was a lot of cases of police brutality, especially the inner cities of California. Compton, Long Beach, Los Angeles. So what did they do? They bore their firearms because they exercised their Second Amendment right. In fact, one of the leaders of the Black Panthers went to Sacramento and he said, he walked into the government building with a shotgun, a loaded shotgun. And he said, I'm here to represent my people in Inglewood. I'm here to represent my people and I will not be disarmed. And the question was, why won't you be disarmed? Because it's a right. It's a fundamental right. What's very interesting is Ronald Reagan at the time was the governor of California. And when he was the governor of California, because of that, he helped institute laws that ban government buildings and firearms. That you had to be 100 feet away from a government building, that you couldn't have a firearm in and around an institution, that you couldn't have firearms in and around public institutions. And you know what that did? That set off a chain across the United States of America. In fact, it evolved and changed and shaped the NRA for what it stands for today. And so what happened is white dudes in Texas were like, whoa, we need... California is leading the way because they're going, hey, you can't have firearms. You can't do this stuff. Well, we need to protect our rights because if it's starting with one state, it's going to have a gross effect in spreading like wildfire across the United States. So they went to the NRA and guess what? The NRA didn't want anything to do with it. They said, no, we're not going to change anything. And then what they did was they did a coup. They did a coup and staged themselves with a deliberate ideal and mission to evolve and change the NRA. The NRA, in fact, at that point, wanted to drop the rifle out of the National Rifle Association. You know, if you know historically about the NRA was developed after the Civil War with the intent to create an organization that would train and teach people responsible weapons handling and marksmanship to defend themselves. Think about that. 1861 to 1864, our United States fights between the North and the South over ideals, over different thoughts. And after that, the NRA stands up in order to teach people marksmanship, to defend from a tyrannical government. How much tyranny do you think would have been if the South would have won the Civil War? So, again, justifying the foundation. So the NRA evolves to protecting people's rights. And I will not, look, I'm not an associate. I'm a member of the NRA because I want somebody representing me when standing up for gun rights and gun laws. The NRA has approximately 5 million members. 5 million members that stand behind the NRA. The NRA is not an organization that stands alone. They represent 5 million people. And so I'm not an advocate to push this NRA agenda, but I'm an advocate for defending my rights, especially when it comes to firearms, because it's a right, not a privilege. It's a right. So, yes, I will acknowledge there is a huge gap of understanding of what these things are capable of what these things do. Jay, thanks for clearing that. 6 million members of the NRA. My information is a little outdated. So I want people to be responsible. And what I do acknowledge is you have to have a good background check. But would background checks have stopped mentally ill people from killing people in mass shootings? No. But is that the issue? I just told you 65% of the 30,000 people killed in gun violence is suicides. And I just told you 80% of those of that portion is crimes, gang on gang violence. But how much energy are we spending on mental health? As the pharmaceutical industry grows by billions and billions of dollars, and more case studies come out that show the negative effects of psychological drugs. I mean, I can't even I've lost count of the amount of special operations veterans that I know that were friends of mine that killed themselves while on these kind of drugs. In combination with alcohol, with depression, and everything else. There's a mental health epidemic, but how much energy are we spending on that? We're not, but we're spending a shit ton of energy on trying to regulate and restrict our rights. So we need background checks to stop criminals from buying firearms. There's no doubt we do. One thing you can't do is you can't discriminate against somebody who's buying a firearm who has a mental health issue. Why? Because it's not that easy. There's too many variables involved. But you can do a more robust analysis of the people who are trying to get those guns and make it more difficult. But then I would ask the question, playing devil's advocate here, I would ask the question, well, then what do you do for the gangbanger on the streets who are running, nickel-plated 25s? Who are running these guns in the streets that have been circulated in the black market? Because that's an epidemic. The inner city of Chicago, they're going to cap out potentially at 600 murders for the year in one city. I've actually been commented against, oh yeah, but it's a big city. Does it fucking matter? I don't think so. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. 600 human beings being killed in one city in America is unacceptable. What are we doing about it? But the issue, again, is this, right? It's not the inner city. It's not impoverished communities. It's not the lack of jobs and the lack of the family unit. It's this thing right here. I think not. So the perspective I come from is understanding that when you're looking at firearms, when you're looking at guns, yes, is there a need potentially for a citizen in the middle of a city owning an AR-15? I don't know. I don't think I could justify that in the inner city. But maybe he does sports shoot on the weekends. Maybe he does hunt. But more than anything, outside of my personal representations, because of my life experience, because of my understanding, I am not going to go against anybody else's right to do anything when it comes to firearms, because it is a right. And it's not the problem. If we spent all the energy these politicians spend and money and actually formulate an actual tangible plan to fix mental health or to assist in mental health, then you'll see a drop off in murders potentially and suicides potentially. Let's just talk about the 65% of the 30,000 I just outlined that are killing themselves. Is that not important? To me, that's more important. Fuck, heart disease in America is more important because in sheer numbers, it's killing more kids. Coca-Cola, what are they doing for our country? You want to point your finger at a Glock that's killed thousands of people in the year. Yeah, that's a problem we need to look at. How many people die every single year because of Coca-Cola? Did you know drinking one Coke every single day can increase your chance of diabetes by 29%? Why is nobody talking about that? Because they don't give a fuck, that's why. Because it's easy to go against the right side with lobbyists and elections and cash flow and everything else by pointing your finger at this gun because it's popular. It's popular in social media. The same popularity of a dude shooting this hitting a fucking target and bragging about it on his Instagram account is the same popularity on the other side, on the left side, when looking at manipulating thoughts and minds. But it's not the priority. It's not real. Responsible ownership is the number one thing I have a problem with in the gun industry. Because I see all these fucking clowns running around with these guns that are not toys, doing backflips and splits and shit, acting like dumbasses. I don't agree with that. When I grew up with a firearm, my first gun I shot was as a child when my dad was in law enforcement, when my dad taught me responsible gun ownership. If he caught me messing around with this gun as a kid, he would have whipped my ass. He taught me that this wasn't a toy, that there was a burden of responsibility that came with the ownership of this. That if you're going to hunt, you're going to do so responsibly. You're going to take the training courses. If you're going to defend yourself and use this as self-defense, you're going to take the training. You're going to understand what damage this can do. I remember watching Faces of Death on VHS as a small child, watching shootings, watching the damage that this could inflict, and the reality setting in that this is not a toy. But what have we done? This is fucking entertainment now. This is entertainment. People are monetizing off the fact that they run around with these guns, entertaining people. And think about how dumb that is. How many likes have you liked this week with people running around with guns looking like dumbasses? I hate that. You know why? Because I've been to war fucking 15 times and I know what this does. I know what war looks like, which is the far right of the expectation of taking a firearm and enacting it and exercising it in an environment where people die. But I also understand the power of this and protecting people that are oppressed when people live. So this isn't a toy. So yeah, I am passionate about the fact that we need to educate our kids and educate our adults with the responsible way to manipulate these firearms, to safely handle them and what they can and can't do. I remember seeing that video of this dumbass politician holding up a gun and misrepresenting an AR-15 and all the damage it does. I think it's comical. The assault weapon ban. Well, if I could educate them and consult them, I would go, when is the last time a terrorist, a criminal, an insane person used an AR-15 or type platform to commit a mass shooting and used his gun on automatic? If you want to inflict more casualties, have it on semi-automatic and utilize this optic, which isn't banned. Utilize the iron sights, which has no restriction. In special operations, I never once, in seven trips to war and 8 government contracting trips to war zones, never one time, and probably 100 gunfights, never one time used this gun on automatic. You know why? Because if you want to inflict casualties, you need to learn how to aim properly and use semi-automatic. But the uneducated public would go, hey, here's a politician that represents me. And he's on TV, on C-SPAN, communicating how much damage and death and destruction is utilized by an AR-15 that's utilized to change this and put it on automatic and inflict damage and destruction. It doesn't work that way. A large capacity magazine. What difference does that make? Because if I can't use a 30 rounder, I'll use a 20 rounder or a 10 rounder, and I'll just get better at reloading the gun. How many casualties, the average mass casualty, mass shooting event that takes place in America lasts 12 minutes? Heidi keeps blowing me up, dude.
On my phone?
Yeah. Oh, that's your phone. My bad. Might be. So when I look at this weapon system, I'm not, how many of them have been doing tack reloads or slide lock reloads in the conduct of a mass casualty assault? So what is the result of that? It does nothing. Even the bump stop where it could actually action the firearm on the back of this, because one shooter utilized a firearm to inflict damage in Las Vegas. But what about the optic? The dude who was in the top floor had a variable optic, like a 21 power optic scope on his gun. But we're concentrating on the gun and the bump stop. I think that whole shit is stupid. They're like, the bump stop's the issue. And the NRA is like, yeah, we'll give you the bump stop. We agree. Well, smart play by the NRA, because it absolutely does nothing. Again, not focusing on the people, which are the problem. We focus on the firearm, which is never the problem. Never. Firearms can't pick themselves up and conduct violence. But you could pick up one and conduct violence with this. Fuck, I could use this Black Rifle coffee mug and beat somebody over the head. We're going to ban coffee mugs? So when we're talking about a firearm, there's so much miseducation in what this actually does. I mean, we've limited the length of the barrel. You have to have a 16-inch barrel. Let me educate you, because I'm a sniper. I'm a special forces sniper. Let me educate you. The more barrel length you have, with the optimized barrel twist and the optimized bullet weight, increases your accuracy. So how fucking dumb are you? How dumb are you that you say, oh, it has to be a minimum, it can't be any shorter. Well, did you know that a 10-inch and shorter gun actually is less accurate and actually has less range? I mean, think about that. Think about that. So now, oh, I can't have a 16-inch gun. Now you're going to restrict it to 18 inches? Let's restrict it to 22 inches, because then you just optimized my range. I mean, let that sink in. So you're not improving or protecting people. You're actually doing the complete opposite because of your miseducation of this firearm. Shorter guns are less accurate because, but it's about concealment. So a consideration for a criminal, a terrorist, or a violent offender is concealment, because they're going to conceal guns in their jacket before they go up to the front guard or the host and shoot them before they commit a mass shooting, right? Because that's what they do. Because they're trying to smuggle these in, and that's what they do. No, that's not what they do. Because when they decide to kick it off, it doesn't matter the shape of the gun. That it makes no sense whatsoever. So let's focus on things that make sense and educate ourselves with things that are real. This firearm is a hunting rifle. It's an AR-15. The maximum effective range of this firearm is 550 meters. We won't restrict calibers, but we'll restrict the AR-15 platform, which is essentially a fucking 22 rifle. This is a 22 variant. It's .223. This is a rifle that is meant to varmint hunt. I've utilized this in combat. It's not the best gun to be utilized in combat. I've shot dudes 10 times and they haven't died because of this type of gun. But a hunting rifle is okay. Yeah, you can own a .338 Lapua. That's okay. We won't even look at those guns, but the AR-15 is the devil. It's not. The AR-15 is a 22 variant with a 30-round magazine capacity. It's gas operated, and it has Picatinny rail space to put accessories. Why don't we ban the Picatinny rail? Because then you won't be able to mount an optic. It's because it's stupid. All the shit you're focusing on is dumb. Let's focus on gun safety, because that's one of the important drivers that I want to drive home today, besides my fucking rant on people's incompetence. This is a Glock 17 pistol. This is my Fieldcraft Survival. This is our Glock 17 holster. It's actually available right now. It's the inside the waistband. It's minimal. I don't like a lot of shit around a holster. Actually, in my contract work, I was working all over the world, and I couldn't afford to let people see that I was carrying, because that could mean the difference between being low vis and being searched, ending up in secondary and potentially prison because I had a pistol concealed on my waistband. The same consideration applies when you are inside the U.S. If you carry a firearm in the U.S., look, you don't want to let people know you have a firearm. You want to operate with concealment, because letting people know that you have a firearm or letting people see that you have a firearm isn't smart. Isn't smart. So this is low vis, meaning it doesn't have a lot of excess. And the Glock 17 is a full-size frame. I actually use this setup during the wintertime. I offset this clip so you can put your belt clip here, and this offsets so you don't have to adjust your EDC belt. And then we put this claw in here to be able to tilt when the belt comes through this portion of it, to tilt the frame against your body. So if it's here, it tilts it this way in order for it to conceal it better. One thing I want you to understand is, just quickly on the cycle of operation, is this gun has two components, two major components: the frame and the slide. The slide reciprocates on the frame. It does that in order to chamber a new round in the cycle of operation. Gun goes boom, combustion takes place, sends the projectile that way, causes blowback of this cycle of operation with a spring and buffer. The round or cartridge extracts the shell casing, rechambers another round off the top of the magazine, and recycles it in its cycle of operation. So boom, boom, boom. When you run out of your last round, there's a clip, there's a notch on the magazine that catches, and then this is what's called slide lock. It means you're out of ammo, and then you have to get the gun back up. Drop the source of feed, slide lock, reload, and get the gun up. So first thing I want you to understand is there are rules for safety, for gun safety. One, never put your finger on the trigger until you decide consciously to pull the trigger or destroy your target. So you're not going to prep your finger on the trigger with holding down on the target. You have it outside the outside the trigger well, and then when you have to, you get back on it in order to pull it. A lot of mistakes that people make is when they get nervous, they do this. And if nerves are tied in to finger prep, it only takes a little bit of movement, a couple pounds of pressure for you to drop the trigger and have an accidental discharge on the target. So we always keep our finger off. Two, you never point anything at, you never point your gun at anything you're not willing to destroy. You never flag your buddies, right? You never flag any person or anything you're not willing to destroy. So yeah, you might be holding down on a threat in your living room, and that's acceptable. But you're not going to, if your friend's here, like I'm the friend and I'm taking the gun across, I'm going to take it around to ensure I don't flag the barrel on somebody, right? The next component to that is 3, you always understand where your target's at and what's behind your target. 800, 900, 1,000 feet per second, that projectile coming out, you need to be able to understand that it potentially will go through them and hit whatever's behind them. A slight change of angle might give you a better angle in order to not do that. But be aware of what's in front and behind your target, especially in the world that we live in as civilians, where there's shit everywhere. I always treat, number 4, always treat every firearm as if it's loaded. So if this gun's sitting on the ground and I walk away from it, I don't know the status of this gun. So if I pick it up, I'm not going to assume this gun is empty. I'm going to do a 3-point check on this gun at all times. The 3-point check is 3 major components. 1, I lock the slide to the rear first, and then I check my 3 major components. 1, it's inside the chamber. I'm ensuring there's not a round inside the chamber. You get your Glock on you, George? All right, so if there was a round in the chamber, you would see the back of the bullet. You would see the primer and the cartridge, right? That's 1. 2, you check the mag well. The mag well is the space right here. You make sure that you see the space. Let's see if we can get it right there. Because if there's a source of feed and you check the chamber and then you drop the slide thinking you're safe, you just loaded around inside your chamber, and now it's loaded. Focus instead of looking down through it and seeing clear space. If it's at night, which is a consideration for both or for all 3, you're going to actually stick a headlamp or stick your finger in there to feel if there's a bullet in the cartridge. Or a cartridge in the chamber. Or inside the mag well. Stick your little fingers in there like that. Next, you're going to check the bolt face. The bolt face is right here. That's the bolt face. It's where the firing pin protrudes outside of the gun, outside of the slide that would hit the back of the primer on the bullet. The reason you check that is because some firearms have receded bolt faces. And so the bullet could be sitting on the bolt face and you could not see it. Submachine guns, some rifles, even some pistols. So again, chamber, magwell, bolt face. When I check it, I don't take the gun and move it down below my waist and check it in the dirt. I'm not going to stand up and do this. I'm not going to stand up and go, okay, yeah, it's good. Because you can't fucking see it down there. Pick the gun up and actually keep it in your field of view. Your eyes are the best indicator of something wrong on a gun. So take your eyes and look inside the chamber and take the gun up to here. This gun's not going to magically shoot you in the face. Look inside the chamber, look inside the magwell, look on the bolt face. Let that ride the or the slide forward. And sometimes I even rack the slide and then I put it away. What I don't do is what social media tacticians and USPSA has given us as a bad habit. And USPSA, when you show safe and make clear, or you show safe and make clear, you lock it to the rear, they look inside your gun, you drop the hammer right on the target. You literally do this. You go, all right, gun safe, and then you do that, and then you put it away. That is a very bad habit to get into, right? Because shit happens. If you're operating at night, under stress, and then you're getting in the habit of clearing your gun and then doing that, that's a real bad habit. One, I don't pull the trigger ever unless I'm behind my gun, right? I don't do that. I don't drop the hammer down here. I always, even if I dry fire to drop, because I'm shooting a competition, they want me to drop it. There's no rules that say you can't extend the gun, look down the sights and then break it, get it a free dry fire out of it and then put it away. All right? So again, 3-point check, boom, 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 slides forward. I might do this and I'll put it away. And that's it. All right? The next component is, I want you to understand that all the work that I do with a firearm is in this box, right? This magical box. From loading a gun, right? To unloading a gun, to safing a gun, to shooting a gun. I work inside this box. This box is optimal because it's in line with my eyes, but also the target. So if all my work is taking place here, it's very efficient. If all my work takes place down here, well, you're only lulling your ability to get the gun up and on target. So if I'm doing a slide lock reload, I run out of ammo, boom, 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 out of ammo, and I bring the gun here, I have to get the gun up here and then bring it back up to here. But if I just tilt the gun into my field of view and then I slide, or I put another mag in and then load it up, I only have to tilt out my wrist. So it's efficient, advantageous, fast, the list goes on. Also, it's in line with your eyes and the target. So if worst case scenario, I could break shots in line. Okay? So, again, 3-point check, everything's good to go. When I'm demonstrating stuff, I usually demonstrate stuff with the slide lock to the rear. If you set down a gun and you're walking away from it, be a good steward of safety by locking the slide to the rear, clearing the gun, and setting it down with the slide lock to the rear. When you do this, and somebody walks by and decides to pick up your gun, if it's loaded and they don't understand good handling or good safety habits, they pick the gun down, they start messing with it. It could be a loaded gun, or it could be a kid. So this gives me the status, or displays the status, that one, it's ready to check. Two, it's a potentially a safe gun. Right? So treating every gun like it's loaded. It's hot as balls in here. This cool shirt or cool jacket is hot as balls, George. We're losing weight, that keto. Damn. Nice. All right, so look. So what I'm going to go over next is some safety practices with the firearm, the Glock 17 specifically. One, I want you to understand that loading. I load the same way typically every single time. There's a big joke about like the press check, right? It's like the press check, looking inside of it. There's an admin reload. When I'm on a range and I'm teaching, or I'm at my house loading up for EDC, I do an admin reload. An admin reload is literally, I have the time outside of a slide lock and a tactical reload to get the gun up. It's completely different. There's a different consideration when you're doing a slide lock reload where you don't have time. So if you run out of ammo, immediately I can get the gun up. But in a admin situation, I'm ensuring the gun is prepared to be in its configuration, like sitting in my Fieldcraft EDC holster in my waistline all day long, knowing that when I grab it and pull it, that everything's good to go. Aaron, I like that question. So when we're talking about safety mechanisms on the Glock, there's three safety mechanisms on here. One's at the firing pin, one's at the disconnect or at the connector, and one is at the trigger. This is a drop safety pin or a drop safety safety. So when you look at this gun, it has no external safeties. There are other firearms that have external safeties. One of the reasons I'm a fan of Glock is because when I pick up a Glock, I know under stress, the only thing I have to do on a loaded gun is pull the trigger, right? If I'm shooting a SIG or if I'm shooting a M&P Pro, if I'm shooting a Colt 1911, there are different considerations. Like, did you know on a SIG, for example, it's double action and single action. This is single action only, SAO. On a SIG, for example, I have a decocker because I can shoot the gun on double action, the first round out of the gun, or single action by cocking the hammer. For those that don't know what single action and double action is, one, the way I look at it is double action is two distinct actions, pulling the trigger and then the hammer dropping back or the mechanism dropping back and firing the gun. Single action is one movement. I pull the trigger and the gun goes boom. And that could be off of a hammer. For example, SIGs have a hammer in the back. So the first time I pull the trigger, it's double action, meaning I pull the trigger and the gun goes back in one action and goes forward in another action. Single action is I can cock the hammer back and then I drop the trigger and it goes forward in one action. So you have the benefit of both. The benefit is in a double action pistol, you have more trigger movement typically in the dual action of that firearm. And people equate that to safety. They go, yeah, it's a lot safer. The trigger's a lot safer. I don't look at it that way. I go, it's more of a liability if I want to pull the trigger and shoot fast. The advantage for single action, it's one movement. And then if the hammers drop back, there's less travel to pull when it's single action. So the debate is if I'm carrying a pistol that's double action, single action only, do I cock the hammer back and roll single action or do I leave it on double action? That's completely up to you. But if you're carrying a gun and you're scared that the gun's going to magically go off if it's single action only, meaning I cock the hammer and put it in my waistband, it's the wrong gun to carry. That's why I like the Glocks. Glock 17, Glock 22, Glock 19/Glock 23, and Glock 42/Glock 43, which is all the Glocks we carry holsters for. Because those Glocks, you do one action, which is pulling the trigger and going to work. All right? Loading. When I load in an admin reload, I lock this slide to the rear. All right? So I have the 3-point check. I still do it. I do this. 1, 2, 3. And I don't check the block. I actually look. I load the pistol with a magazine. I put the magazine in, and I seat it. Now, typically, if I'm doing a slide lock, I go boom, 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 and then I smack the magazine back in the gun to get it back up because I don't have the time to seat it. When I load a gun in admin, I load it and I pull it. So I click and then I pull to make sure it's properly seated because I have had pistols that the Glock magazine hasn't properly seated, and then when you pull the trigger the first time, it falls out of the gun, which is a bad day, right? Do Glocks have chamber slits to see brass chambers? Aaron, they do in the barrel of some of the guns. I've seen them before, but this particular model, which I think has a matched barrel, does not have that. Something on a press check real quick, since Aaron brought it up. Good questions, Aaron. When I press check a gun, I press check it from the front end of the gun until I see brass. And then I let it go forward, and then I push with my thumb forward to make sure it's in battery. Out of battery is this, which means it's not fully chambered, which means that there's negative, number one, there's a gap there for the firing pin to hit the safety or hit the primer. But two, there's a gap there in the chamber that when combustion takes place, like if it did fire, you get more than likely a failure to feed because of less gas. So I press check this way, I let it go, and then I push it forward and then put it away. I don't do this again and again and again. But people in the tactical space that I highly respect actually think there's an issue with press checking. Why? Why would there be an issue with press checking? I do it with my AR-15. I do it with my M4. If I'm going to work or going to war, you better believe I'm press checking the gun to make sure a chamber's in there. Why? Because there's a chance in the loading of a gun that you don't properly seat the gun and the bolt or the slide overrides the ammunition and you don't chamber around. I'm not fucking taking that chance. So when I look, I press check, it's good. It takes me an extra couple seconds and I'm good. I'm not saying press check your gun in a gunfight. I'm saying during the admin reload, make sure you do that. All right, so the gun's good to go. When I seat the magazine and push and pull it, I then rack the gun. I rack the gun from the rear or from the front. If you're doing it from the rear, look over the gun, right? It's in my field of view, and watch the round being chambered. Don't try to impede the natural function and the spring tension of the slide. Write it back and let it go. Write it back and let it go. And let the mechanical operation of the cycling chamber a new round. From the front, you can do the same thing in front. You chamber it from the front and then let it go. I'm a big fan now of doing it from the rear. I just said that out loud. I'm a big fan now of doing it from the rear, which is I do overhand and look down. I will say if you're a woman, it's best to do it from the rear because your hands are small enough to fit here in this portion. If you're a woman or if you're a dude with small hands, like George, he could always do it from the rear because he's got these little baby hands, these carny hands. So you can do it from the rear, grab it, pull it back to the rear. You can still see the chamber and then feed it. But do you know it's chambered? I don't fucking know. I'm not magical. My eyes can't register at that speed. So I'm going to pull it back with a chamber check and then make sure it's good and then let it go and push it forward. You can do the same thing from the rear with a chamber check. I like to put my finger on the slide to regulate the speed because what happens is you pull back too far and then you cause a double feed. All right. So that's loading. Again, and what I do is I get behind my sights. I don't put my finger on the trigger, get behind my sights, get that free sight picture, and then I put it away. Unloading, complete opposite. Dropping the source of feed first. Locking the slide to the rear and letting the round come out of the chamber. That's a good indicator that the gun's empty. There's no ammunition in here because you just dropped the source of feed, and now you just let it go to the rear and it's gone. Okay, so that's a good indicator that it's not there, but you still do a 3-point check. 1, 2, 3. It's good to go. Slide forward, rack the slide again, and then I put it away. Another good, Freddie just reminded me, another good way to think about it is a lot of people shoot with gloves. So if you shoot with gloves, racking it from the front is not smart, in my opinion, right? Because it's a more fine motor skill than grossly manipulating the gun from the rear. I think a lot of people misconstrue fine and gross motor skills. Building a Rolex watch is a fine motor skill. Manipulating a firearm requires no fine motor skills. If you know that I always say the test to fine motor skills is hand whatever you're evaluating to a monkey. If a monkey can take the gun and pull the trigger, then it's not a fine motor skill. So gross manipulation of the firearm can be conducted which is beneficial under stress, and when you're trying to manipulate a small firearm with big digits. Okay, so taking your hands here from the rear is smart. All right, I'm putting this away because I'm running short on time. AR-15, same exact understanding, right? Same rules apply. When I operate with AR-15, I get used to retracting the gun underneath my arm because when I do so, it allows me to manipulate it without getting smoked. People try to do this and it'll smoke you. Take it under your arm, let your arm pit support the gun, and then be able to manipulate the gun in your workspace. The same square exists, right? So, okay, I'm here, right? I'm going to clear this gun with a 3-point check. Same things apply. I might take the gun and set it on my hip, and that allows me to work with both hands, pulling the chamber or pulling the charging handle back to the rear, and then locking the firearm with this little bitty right here. All right, this is the bolt latch or bolt release. All right. So pushing constant pressure, pulling back to the rear. And then when I do that, it locks the bolt. And then you can just let go. This actually could be loose. Right? And now this is risen or up, which lets you know that's an indicator that the bolt is to the rear. So now my 3-point check, I'm doing the same thing. I'm keeping it in my field of view. I look down into the chamber. I look down into the mag well and see space. I might even stick my fingers up through here. And then I look at the bolt face. Right? You have two major components of the bolt carrier group, which is the bolt carrier group, which is the ass end of the bolt, and then you have the bolt itself, which is the front end of the bolt. I'm checking to make sure there's not a round sitting on the bolt itself, okay? And then I'll let the bolt go forward, and then I even do this to make sure it's good, and then the gun's good, safe. All right, when loading this gun, I take a magazine and I seat it. If you take a magazine and you seat it on a closed bolt on an AR-15, it'll be very difficult to load that magazine properly. The biggest malfunction, the number one malfunction I see on firearms is in the loading procedure of the firearm manipulation. What they do is they take the gun, the bolt's forward, they stick a magazine in and they think it's good. Again, this whole ab and reload. They take the gun, they chamber what they think is a round. In actuality, they're overriding, the bolt's overriding the top of the round, and then they're going to work. That is a mistake, because the first thing that's going to happen is click, and then you know what's going to happen? They're going to go, oh, so if they slide, pull, observe, release, tap, squeeze, which is sports like an immediate action, then they more than likely didn't seat it again, click, and it happens again. Big problem. One, pay attention to your first loads. So the first thing you do is lock the slide to the rear like I just showed you, or lock the bolt to the rear like I just showed you. Two, 3-point check, insert the magazine and make sure you push and pull every single time. Push and pull. On a slide lock, you don't really need to do that because you don't have time, number one, but two, the bolt's already locked to the rear. Push, pull, turn the gun back over and watch the round being chambered. You could chamber the round by pulling back on the charging handle, which I think is a waste of time, or slap the support hand side paddle on the bolt catch. So I could go right here and go, boom. But observe the round being chambered. So how do I know it's chambered? You don't know. All right, so here's a tactic. One, you could press check it by pulling back a little bit to the rear. But if you're running your gun and there's a lot of carbon buildup, which is you'll see a lot of carbon foul, there's a chance that it won't go all the way back into chamber or into battery. And you'll see actually this instead of that. You'll see this instead of that, which is a problem. Hey, on the IG side, we're going to lose you in 25 seconds, but I'll just restart the live for the conclusion of this. On the Facebook side, we're still good to go. I'll take a short little break right here for 15 seconds, and then I'll restart it, and we'll get hot again. Damn, it's hot as fuck in here. It's all that coffee, man. Mm-hmm. Black Rifle's got me freaking sweating. Okay, putting on live. Bam. Oh, crap. I didn't even know you could do lives. How do I do it live? Oh, it won't let me do another live. Okay, we'll just continue on this. So the next thing you do is, you could chamber check it like this, right? But there's a chance that it's not completely chambered, and that's a problem. The next thing you could do is actually drop the mag again and look at it and go, okay, when I inserted it, there was one on the right side. So not double fed, but double stacked. So now there should be one off the right side and then a bullet on the left side, which means there's a round in the chamber. I do this. I lock it to the rear like this, and then I let it go as hard as I can. Some people with AR-15s, manufacturers, are getting rid of the forward assist. I think that's a mistake because these guns, under a lot of shooting, this BCM doesn't have that issue, but under a lot of shooting, need a forward assist. So in this setup like this, if it's just like that, what I can do is just tap my forward assist and will drive this bolt a little further up to make sure it's properly chambered. So now the gun is actually good to go. All right, so for unloading, I'm dropping the magazine, releasing the magazine away from the gun, stowing it, and I'm locking the slide to the rear. Boom. What happens is a round should come outside the chamber, and then I'm doing my 3-point check and evaluation. Chamber, mag well, and bolt face, and now it should be good. All right, that's basic safety, guys. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these. I hope you guys liked the video. It was an hour long, which is awesome because I like long form versions of content. This whole clickbait shit isn't working for me anymore. I want to be able to get the point across and get the education out there. And if it takes 10 hours, it takes 10 hours. We'll just do it. If you don't have the patience to listen to it, pause it, come back to it. Instead of doing this clickbait shit where it's just like, oh, let's just do something popular for 1 to 4 minutes. When you're talking about firearms, we don't take that shortcut. All right, guys, I hope you guys have a good day. Till next time, watch this. Stay alert.
Stay alive.
Oh, yeah.